Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. US and UK launch joint strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, hit 36 sites across 13 locations. Namibia's president, Hage Geingob, dies after cancer diagnosis. In cricket, Bumrah's historic 6-wicket haul and double ton by Yashasvi Jaiswal provide India a 171-run lead against England in the second test. The US and the United Kingdom have struck multiple targets against Iran-linked Houthi militants in Yemen. The United Kingdom government on Saturday called this third wave of strikes as proportionate and targeted. Its defense ministry released the footage saying precision-guided bombs were used to strike multiple targets near the Sana'a airfield. The strikes hit buried weapons storage facilities, missile systems, launchers and other capabilities the Houthis have used to attack the Red Sea shipping zone. While United States Central Command also released photos showing a missile launch and flight operations for strikes. The Pentagon said it targeted 13 locations across the country. The US and Britain lead the strikes against 36 targets in total in the second day of the major US operations against Iran-linked groups following a deadly attack on American troops last weekend. The UN Security Council is going to hold an emergency meeting on Monday regarding the US strikes in Iraq and Syria. The meeting has been requested by Russia after accusing the US of intentionally aggravating the situation in West Asia. Meanwhile, United States has issued a warning of more potential airstrikes after carrying out an offensive against 85 targets in Iraq and Syria. Now, this comes in response to a drone strike from an Iran-backed militia that killed 3 American service members. Our correspondent Nick Harper gets us the details from Washington.
We've seen considerable anger from the Middle East in response to these US airstrikes, Iraq and Syria, that were struck by the United States, but also Iran, who has backed the militia in those two countries, all saying that the US has violated the sovereignty of both Syria and Iraq, and also saying that the US is threatening to create a wider conflict in the Middle East. Iraq and Syria also saying that civilians have been killed in these airstrikes. Now, the US says that they struck targets that they intended to, and they were also telegraphing for several days that these strikes were likely to take place. It seems in the hope of minimising casualties. Reports that many of the militia in those command centres that were hit had evacuated ahead of the strikes. But there's still that fear now as to whether the US airstrikes will create a deterrence or become a point of escalation in this conflict in the Middle East. Now, Joe Biden has said that he isn't seeking a wider war, but he's also said that these strikes that took place on Friday night US time were just the beginning, that there would be more strikes potentially in the coming days against other militia or other command centres within the region. Biden saying that it will continue at the time and place of the US choosing. So the US is trying to deter future attacks, but there is still that overriding fear that what the United States has done may prompt further escalatory action from any of those 3 countries in the region. Although I think it is worth noting that the United States chose not to target Iran itself. There were no attacks on Iranian soil, and we have not seen from Iran, despite the condemnation, any threats to retaliate as a result of these US strikes. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Swiss farmers protest against rising costs and low prices for their produce, joining a movement that has spread across Europe. The protests included around 30 tractors parked on a square in the center of Switzerland's second largest city. Farmers driving up to 40 tractors also took part in a protest in the Basel region. Farmers' protests have erupted in several European countries in a sign of anger at low prices for produce, rising costs, cheap imports and constraints imposed by the EU's drive to fight climate change. Rudy Berli, president of the Geneva Farmers Union, said that Switzerland's two main distributors dictate the prices paid to farmers and that the protesters were asking Parliament to bring in measures that would allow farmers to negotiate more fairly with the buyers of the agricultural produce. Around 150,000 people attended a protest rally in the German capital of Berlin against the far right and its ideology, the latest in a series of such demonstrations across Germany in recent weeks. Protests on Saturday also took place in Dresden, Mainz and Hanover in a sign of growing alarm at the strong public support for the AfD party. Protesters flocked to Reichstag Parliament building in Berlin, where protesters gathered in protest against right-wing extremism and to show support for democracy. Earlier this week, a Forza poll showed that backing for the party dropped below 20% for the first time since July, with voters citing nationwide demonstrations against the far right as the most important issue. Thailand and Sri Lanka signed a free trade agreement on Saturday, a move Sri Lanka hopes will help it emerge from its worst financial crisis in decades. A delegation headed by Thai Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin arrived in Colombo to sign the FTA along with other agreements. Thavisin will also attend Sri Lanka's 76th Independence Day celebrations. The FTA is aimed at enhancing market opportunities with negotiations covering various aspects such as trade in goods, investment, customs procedure and intellectual property rights. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Khan were sentenced to 7 years in prison and fined by a court that ruled their 2018 marriage violated the law. It was the third adverse ruling against the former Prime Minister this week and comes ahead of national elections that he is barred from contesting. The two were fined $1,800 each. Bushra was accused of not completing the waiting period mandated by Islam after divorcing her previous husband and marrying Imran Khan. The Khans signed their marriage contract in January 2018 in a secret ceremony 7 months before Imran Khan became Prime Minister for the first time. Khan is in prison in the garrison city of Rawalpindi, while his wife had been allowed to serve her sentence at their hilltop mansion in Islamabad. Namibia's president, Hage Geingob, aged 82 years of age, has died in hospital early on Sunday. The news came in less than 3 weeks after it was announced that he would undergo treatment for cancer. Geingob, who also served as a 12-year stint as Prime Minister, had a history of health problems that preceded his election as Namibia's third president in 2014. Namibia is scheduled to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in November. Geingob was ineligible to run for re-election as Namibia's constitution limits the president to a maximum of 2 terms in office. The ruling SWAPO party's presidential candidate, Nandi Datwa, would be the country's first female head of the state if elected. Northern Ireland's Parliament appointed an Irish nationalist as the First Minister for the first time in a historic shift. Michelle O'Neill is the first nationalist to hold the post as the government returns to work after a 2-year boycott by the Unionists. O'Neill first addressed the Northern Ireland Assembly in Irish, saying the appointment to First Minister was a massive honour. The appointment came as Sinn Féin's pro-British rival, the Democratic Unionist Party, formally ended a 2-year boycott of power-sharing government after striking a deal with British government to ease post-Brexit trade frictions. El Salvador goes to polls on Sunday to choose a president. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, is expected to be re-elected for another 5-year term, despite a constitutional bar on immediate re-election. The supporters of 42-year-old Bukele see a leader whose iron-fisted policies defeated the country's murderous gangs, while its critics call him a modern-day autocrat. A quick look at other stories making it to the headlines from across the world now. Turkey handed over keys to newly completed homes to some of those left homeless after last year's devastating earthquake, 1 year after the country's deadliest disaster. The government has planned to give a total of 2 million houses to the victims this year. Powerful quakes on February 6th, 2023 in southern Turkey killed more than 50,000 people in 11 provinces and left millions homeless. Brazilians gathered in Rio de Janeiro's Samba Dome to bless the iconic venue a week ahead of the beginning of the carnival's competitions. Dressed mostly in white, members of the Catholic, Umbanda and Candomblé faiths took part in the ecumenical rite. We're heading for a short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India Live, US President wins South Carolina's Democratic primary. Another day of saving by Indian Navy. Its Coast Guard ship saves a precious life in the dark hours. 4th February marks World Cancer Day to raise awareness to encourage its prevention, detection and treatment.
Our modern industrialized world is producing more toxins than ever before. Water quality across several parts of the world is getting worse.
We need to have these wastewater treatment plants.
Government is carving out localities here and there and releasing all the sewage water into these lakes.
When we analyze all this, the food, constituents of the food had heavy metal.
With biotanks, the sewage water gets recycled. It can be used for different purposes or drained into the ground.
Shipwrecks are a major problem and airtight international rules are needed to make a difference.
To 10% of a giant ship's weight is made up of asbestos, heavy metals, oil and other toxic substances.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts. We demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live and I'm Preeti. Let's continue getting more international updates. US President Joe Biden has had a decisive victory in the South Carolina primary, the first official nominating contest of the US presidential election calendar. While Biden faced little opposition, the vote was being closely watched amidst concerns about his popularity, especially among the black voters. Biden defeated other long-shot Democrats on South Carolina's ballot, including US Representative Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson. US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris made a joint stop at their 2024 campaign headquarters on Saturday to rally staff and supporters ahead of a challenging re-election bid. Kate Fisher reports from South Carolina on this.
Well, it didn't take them too long to finish counting the votes here at Charleston County Board of Elections because the turnout was fairly low. But still an emphatic victory for President Biden in the state that he credits with propelling him to the White House in 2020. And in a statement on Saturday night, once again, he vowed that South Carolina would take him back to the White House once again. But this Republican-leaning state is unlikely to be a general election battleground come November. Even so, the Biden campaign has treated South Carolina's primary as an important contest. It's spent money here on staff and advertising, essentially using the state to test messages aimed at black voters who typically make up around 2/3 of South Carolina's Democratic primary electorate. So, After months of polling that showed a growing percentage of black voters souring on Mr. Biden and his message, the primary was the first opportunity for them to deliver a verdict on the president. And though turnout was low, Democrats have been celebrating early data that showed a 13% increase in the share of black voters compared with 2020. So South Carolina may not be up for grabs for Joe Biden come November, but how well he can energise black voters here could forecast how well he'll do in other parts of the country. And as he prepares for what looks like it will be another rematch with former President Donald Trump, every vote will count. Kate Fisher in Charleston, South Carolina, reporting for DD India.
Forest fires raging in central Chile have killed over 50 people so far. Chile's President Gabriel Boric has warned that the death toll is likely to keep rising. Take a look at this report.
At present, the world is grappling with the adverse effects of global warming. While some areas are experiencing wildfires, others are facing floods. Every effort is being made to deal with natural disasters. But until our efforts yield positive results, is there any way to save the planet from this catastrophe? Chile is currently grappling with a critical weather crisis as devastating wildfires have ravaged the central Paraíso region with approximately 480 hectares of land engulfed in flames.
The fire in the Melosila sector where we are right now has affected close to 480 hectares. It was caused by the weather conditions, the temperature, extreme heat.
The Melosila area has been severely affected, a tragedy attributed to soaring temperatures and exacerbated by strong winds.
The outcome has been the loss of over 50 lives, and concerns arise that this number may escalate.
We need help, food for our pets, supplies, clothes. I don't know. My house, I lost everything, everything.
The aftermath is grim, with drone footage displaying the desolate remnants of scorched homes, highlighting the severity of the situation as the deadliest forest fire outbreak in the past 10 years.
From one moment to the next, the fire reached the botanical park. In 10 minutes, the fire was already on us. There was smoke, the sky turned black, everything was dark. The wind felt like a hurricane. It was like being in hell.
The entire nation is plagued by 92 active fires, resulting in over 43,000 hectares being impacted, with 7,000 burned hectares in Valparaiso alone.
My wife had a workshop with workout gear and I had my workshop with swing machines.
The situation remains critical, necessitating continued vigilance and support. Bureau Report, DT India.
Sri Lanka is celebrating its 76th National Independence Day today. The main celebrations are being held at Galle Face Green in Colombo amid tight security. The official ceremony commenced with the arrival of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. The Prime Minister of Thailand, Srettha Thavisin, is the chief guest of the Independence Day celebrations, which are being held under the theme Let's Build a New Country in Galle. This year's Independence Day celebration features a multitude of spectacular events, with a march by members of the Tri-Forces, Police, Civil Defence Force and cadets celebrating Sri Lanka's independence. With an aim to boost the overall economic development of northeastern Guwahati, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to inaugurate and lay the foundation stone of multiple projects, including the foundation stone for Ma Kamakhya Access Corridor to provide world-class amenities to pilgrims visiting Kamakhya Temple. The Prime Minister will also lay the foundation stone of multiple road upgradation projects. These projects will help improve connectivity to Itanagar and boost the overall economic development of the region. In a joint operation, the Indian Army and Kupwara police evacuated a pregnant lady who was stuck in heavy snowfall in Jammu and Kashmir's Kupwara district. Army camp Geingob received a distress call requesting the medical evacuation of the woman who was in a critical condition. Despite heavy snow, the rescue team hiked about 8 kilometers in 2 feet of snow and safely evacuated the woman. The family and doctors expressed gratitude to the Indian Army and Geingob police for their swift action and timely assistance. Responding to distress call quickly, the Indian Coast Guard ship saved a precious life in the dark hours. In a swift operation conducted on the night of 3rd February, ship C-439 saved the life of a man who had fallen into the sea off Mumbai from a private yacht. Indian Coast Guard found a person hanging to anchor of the ship. The rescue operation lasted 3 hours. During his visit to eastern state of Odisha on February 3rd, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi met some of the distinguished Padma awardees from the state who made rich contribution to our nation at the grassroots level. Prime Minister met Jitendra Haripal, a Padma Shri awardee of 2017 for his exemplary contribution towards music. Prime Minister also met Dr. Krishna Patel, 2023 Padma Shri awardee, a celebrated Sambalpuri folk singer whose mesmerizing voice has resonated for over 4 decades now. Prime Minister also met Mitra Bhanu Gontia, honored with Padma Shri in 2020. The Prime Minister also met and appreciated the contribution of 2016 Padma Shri awardee Haladhar Nag in Sambalpuri and Odia literature. India's lower house, or the Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, paid floral tributes to former Lok Sabha Speaker M. Ananthasanam Iyengar in the Central Hall of Samvidhan Sadan on his birth anniversary. Deputy Chairman and Rajya Sabha and other members of Parliament also paid floral tributes. M. A. Iyengar was a veteran freedom fighter and eminent parliamentarian. When the first Lok Sabha was constituted in 1952, M. A. Iyengar was the unanimous choice to be its deputy speaker. A quick look at other stories making it to the headlines from across India. A joint special forces exercise Khanjar between India and Kyrgyzstan culminated with the validation training at Baklao in India's Himachal Pradesh. The exercise facilitated synergy in the conduct of the special operations and strengthened the understanding and interoperability between the two armed forces. Hero Motorcorp showcased a rather unique concept called the Surge at Bharat Mobility Global Expo 2024. It's a three-wheeler that can be converted into a two-wheeler and vice versa in around 3 minutes. Both vehicles have their own electric motor and battery pack, but can be controlled using one set of controls. Our correspondent Tapas Bhattacharya acquaints us with more details.
You guys have seen a lot of three-wheelers in India. It's a very common sight, but have you seen a three-wheeler which can turn into a two-wheeler? Not sure. So this is the first of this kind of a hybrid machine, which is basically a three-wheeler, but this can turn into a two-wheeler. It's a passenger vehicle. It has a lot of capacity, carrying capacity. At the same time, you can take this out, you can park it somewhere, and if you wish to use only the two-wheeler, you can just take it out. This is one of the classic example of how innovation can be done in a very limited way. Surge, it's a startup that has been pioneered in Hero Motorcorp, and this is one of their classic example of a three-wheeler that can turn into a two-wheeler. It has a lot of carrying capacity. It can be used by small traders. It can be used as a passenger vehicle. And if you don't want any of that, you can use this as a two-wheeler. How cool is that? With camera person, this is Tapas Bhattacharya for DD India from Delhi.
The world observes World Cancer Day today. Between 2022 and 2024, the focus is to help close the cancer gap. This year marks the third and final year of the campaign. The theme for this year is Together We Challenge Those in Power. Now, this theme encompasses the global demand for leaders to prioritize and invest in cancer prevention and care and to do more to achieve a just and cancer-free world. In sports, in cricket, day 3 of the second test match is currently underway between India and England in Visakhapatnam. Shubman Gill overcame early jitters to strike a fighting 50 and steer India to 140 for 4. James Anderson's 2-wicket burst rocked India, but Shubman Gill hung around to help stretch India's overall lead to 273. Resuming their second innings at 28 for no loss, India scored 102 runs in the session with the loss of Rohit Sharma, Yashasvi Jaiswal, Shreyas Iyer and Rajat Patidar. Gill survived 2 close DRS calls in successive overs soon after his arrival into the middle to post his first 50-plus score in 13 innings. Gill and Iyer, both struggling for runs, found themselves in the middle and ended up sharing an 81-run standoff, 112 balls. Debutant Patidar was the last wicket to fall in the session. India has taken a 2-0 lead against Pakistan in Davis Cup World Cup Group 1 playoff match in Islamabad on Saturday. In the first singles match, Ramkumar Ramanathan defeated Asim ul Haq Qureshi in a grueling 3-set match. Ramanathan displayed resilience and determination to secure a 6-7, 7-6, 6-0 victory after losing the first set. In another singles match, Sriram Balaji overcame Akil Khan in straight sets. He won 7-5, 6-3 to give India a 2-0 lead on the opening day. India will take on Pakistan in the remaining 2 singles and doubles ties on Sunday. That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and also Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.